Joining me here in studio, Dennis Linthicum, running for Congress, primary challenger for Congressman Greg Walden, U.S. 2nd District there. Dennis, welcome back to the program, sir. Good to see you.
Good morning. It is great to be here, as always.
All right. So last night you were in Grants Pass and doing some talk over at the Black Bear restaurant?
That's right. And we had a great group of people. We packed them into their banquet facility, and it was great. Made a lot of new friends, a lot of folks who haven't seen me and are curious, who is this guy and what is he up to?
Yeah, what is he up to?
Yeah,
right. Are you kind of whistle stomping the state right now? I mean, what's your story?
I am. Last week, I started out in Bend, went to Prineville, John Day, Baker City. We ended up all the way out in Wallowa. We were at the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation dinner that was up in La Grande, and then we went over to Hood River. I was knocking on Greg Walden's front door, in essence, being in Hood River, which is his hometown.
Yeah, kind of interesting. What is it like when you are a challenger and you're going to the incumbent's hometown, really the power base, as it were?
Right.
I mean, did they just slam doors and just say, hey, Dennis, you're a nice guy, get out of here, and what?
Yeah, nobody really knew the difference. I had a great interview. I haven't seen it come out yet, but the local newspaper came by and said hi and that sort of thing. So it's good. Everyone asks the same question, though. They wonder, what's the difference between you and Greg? You're both Republicans. I think you're both conservatives, and that's where I stop people and interrupt them.
Well, what do you mean both conservatives and you interrupt them? And you interrupt them with what?
I interrupt them with the truth of the matter with regard to Greg's conservatism. The real difference between myself and Greg Walden is he's been in politics for 30 years, and I've been in politics for 3. I've been in private enterprise for 30 years, not politics for 30 years. Mm-hmm. I think that necessarily describes us in different terms because Greg Walden is a statist. He believes in the power and the authority and the regulatory quagmire that the U.S. is currently struggling under. And I believe in individual liberty, business freedom, school choice, all of those kinds of things that are on everybody's lips.
Well, I would, not to put words in Congressman Walden's mouth here, because he's not here to talk about it, but chances are, if you were to have visited Greg in the early parts of his career, probably would have said much the same thing.
Indeed, and I think that's problematic. When somebody has been in the pressure cooker for 16 years or so, as Greg has been, I think the spending culture that is Washington, D.C., the culture that is begging for $1.1 trillion budgets like we just saw in the omnibus bill, that culture becomes a normal way of life. Whereas you and I, in small-scale parts of Oregon, you and I don't think like that. These numbers are astronomical, and they're deficit spending. They're spending money that we do not have today. Then you and I ask the question, like every other individual that walks in and out of a grocery store, and we say, how can they do that? And they assure us we're increasing spending to, and then it's just this fairy tale about what the end results were. Your conversation this morning talked about all of the unintended consequences that arise from some of these policies. I say we need less government, less regulation. We need more independence. I don't like them telling me what kind of cake they're going to, force this bakery to produce for me, or what kind of incandescent bulb I can't buy this week.
Yeah, big challenge you run into is that even the Republican power structure, the leadership has gone along. I can think back even to, the first of the year as an example. The 60-watt incandescent light bulb was banned in the traditional sense. And you could sell the old stuff, but you can't make any more. This is decreed by Congress. But that didn't come from a Democratic Congress. That came from George Bush at a Republican-controlled Congress in those days.
Right, and I would suggest those men who did that have been in office too long, and it's called to whistle as loud as we can, put out the fire, and call the dogs home. At some point, we just have to stop this mentality that says spending is okay, it'll be good for you. If we continue down...
regulation is okay. It'll be good for you, too.
That's right. That's right. Look, they didn't implement the incandescent bulb policy without spending one of your nickels, right? They implemented that political whim, that ecological, special interest-driven, capricious activity. They implemented that using all of our money against us simply to poke an arrow in your face. A pencil, actually, is what I've got in my hand. People can't see. I'm waving this at Bill Meyer.
He's
like
waving it
TV.
angrily, too, like, hey, you listen.
The point is, everyone imagines the government enterprise is just a cost-free mechanism. If you want to donate money to a charity, you could give 100% of your money straight to the charity. If you do it through tax dollars and government, they'll siphon off 50 or 60% of it. They'll give the remaining 40 cents to the charity. If your heart was really geared toward compassion at the personal level, you would do it in your own neighborhood. You would not force your other neighbors to do it through the government taxing system.
All right, so Dennis, it is obvious you don't have a lot of good things to say about, the way Congress is run right now, the way Washington, D.C. is run. Why do you want to join this here?
Well, yeah, how I describe it is as a commissioner in Klamath County, I've been a commissioner for 3 years. What I see happening on a daily basis is the EPA or any regulatory agency for that matter is throwing dirt in our face. And as I think about it, the way federal government makes rules like EPA, they pass them to the state government, which is now at this point quite redundant. It's Oregon Department of Environmental Quality.
Yeah, but Oregon is relatively supine to what the federal government tells it to do, right?
Exactly my point. And that lands on commissioners' backs who are subdivisions of state government. So commissioners basically end up following federal law because Oregon is supine. I'm asking the question, is there federal authority, is there constitutional authority for that federal behemoth that's out there? And I think there is not constitutional authority. If we had an EPA policy that went from East Coast to West Coast, we'll actually end up harming the entire U.S., every one of the 310 million souls. If I have a mistake within the Oregon jurisdiction, I only impact those 3.5 million people that live in Oregon. And you and I can drive to Salem. We can go to our commissioner's office. We can make local changes. We can't do it out there.
There's more of a chance of affecting some change when you have more of the power devolved or at least decentralized to the local rather than the federal. I concede your point then, but I guess, back to the question of why are you running, this almost seems as if you're running for Congress, correct me if I'm wrong, as a self-defense mechanism for the people of Oregon.
Absolutely. The government was instituted to defend your rights, and that's the key point. Government today is not defending your rights. They're regulating your life, and they should be about defending your life and your liberty and your individual pursuits of happiness. That's what government has been instituted to defend. If we strip those inalienable rights from you and regulate and control every aspect of your life, you've lost that liberty. And that's what government was instituted to achieve.
Dennis Linthicum is on the program. He's running for Congress, U.S. 2nd District, and had to take your calls. If you have a question, wanted to ask him about a particular issue, number here is 770-563-3770 KMED. Dennis, we'll be right back and maybe kick around some of these other issues here, all right? All coming up on the Bill Meyer Show. 22 after 7, back with Dennis Linthicum. By the way, his website is dennis2014.com, and you can read various articles, and you can donate, of course. I do this with any candidate. Hey, this is where you got to go send money. Right. Everybody wants to, send money here. And let's just head to the phones. Why don't we just talk to people who want to talk with you, all right? Let's talk with Brad. Brad here on the drought dams. You're with Dennis Linthicum. Go ahead.
Good morning, William. I'm glad to hear Dennis on your show this morning.
Well, good.
I wanted to ask you a question or two. I had to go down to Reading recently, and I can't believe how low Shasta Dam is.
Mm-hmm.
Shasta, and it seems to me that the Klamath River is flowing fine. The Rogue River is flowing fine. I was up in Klamath the other day, and I don't see any effect on the Klamath Lake yet. Immigrant Lake is, again, like a mud puddle. What's going on with the water?
Actually, because of the biological opinion, the water is being allowed. They're trying to meet two different needs. One is a flow requirement for the Chinook. The other is a lake level requirement for the short-nosed sucker, both endangered or potentially threatened and endangered species. So they're trying to manage that lake level and water level to meet most of those agendas. What that means is you dry up agricultural land. Klamath County this last year gave $218,000 in tax money back to farmers who have been idled during this past year.
Bob, you're up next here. Dennis Linthicum, go ahead.
Good morning, Dennis. Hey, I like everything I'm hearing from you so far. And, excuse me, I've been trying for about 10 years to find somebody that I could call and who would possibly take it as part of their campaign. The anti-restriction candidate.
The anti-restriction candidate. That's
right.
An interesting take on that.
I'm a candidate who, when you elect me, will be your representative to eliminate restrictions rather than to pass more restrictions.
Yeah, I kind of think I know where you're headed, and I have said that before. We make the mistake, we think we're hiring legislators as we put men and women into Washington, D.C. I think that's problematic because once they get there, they think their job is to, quote, legislate, and they write some of the most god-awful legislation you've ever seen. What I think I would like to do is do what you're describing, and I'd like to be a de-legislator. You know, that's kind of like the Terminator for programs that are out-needed and unneeded, expensive, and don't produce the results we're expecting.
All right. I would like to see a campaign on that basis, and then follow through on it once you're in office.
All right, Bob. Thanks for the call. Did you have another comment there?
I was just going to say, think about how relevant that concept is. If we keep burdening our culture with laws on the way here, how many laws did you break this morning anyway?
Probably 3 or 4, according to the prosecutors. Well, the funny thing is, look what they call you guys, though. They call you lawmakers.
Right. Well, and I think that's problematic. Even that terminology has been adopted, which now includes that's what I'm supposed to do. Why is it people never undo some of those horrible things that were done during the New Deal era?
So you would be, let's say that you make it to the primary and then you end up being elected here in the 2nd District. If that were to happen, we're going a lot of ifs at this point.
No, those are beautiful realities in my mind.
What do you accomplish then as 1 out of 400-some?
Well, look at the $1.1 trillion budget deal. Greg Walden says this is a step in the right direction, and nobody on the street that I have talked to yet agrees with that single statement. This is a step in the right direction. We're going to blow apart sequestration, which happened, which was in law for 60 days, and they detonate that, and then they increase spending and tell us 10 years out, I'm going to rely on someone else to reduce spending in the years 2022 and 2023. An honest engine, when we get out there, we're going to save when we finally hit that mark out in the timeline. This is utopian nonsense. You cannot save money by spending more.
Well, I'm a little curious how they can project any kind of savings in the future, because no current Congress can bind a future Congress and tell them to spend money or to not spend money.
Well, and
you can only change what you spend right now.
And maybe the real mistake is in their mind's eye. They see themselves as still sitting in office, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to upset the apple cart, and I'm asking people to bring these guys home.
Okay, how long do you think is a reasonable term, let's say, for a U.S. representative, a U.S. congressman, maybe even with a senator? How many terms should you have?
I think 8 years is plenty. I think George Washington set a great example. He served 2 terms. He did 8 years. He went back and focused again on his family and his farm and his private life. I think that would be plenty. I think that includes senators. They're at 6. They would be at 12 after 2 terms.
So 4 terms for a
congressman every 2 years. Remember, the Congress guys are in the House. Those House members are the guys who control the money bags. And because they're the ones responsible for financing the government enterprise, they're supposed to be closest to their constituents, i.e. the public, and they're supposed to get reelected every 2 years. This is constitutional stuff. And I think it's fair to say that the founders recognized this problem and said, because of this hazard, we will limit this office to 2 years. And what we'd like to see is citizen statesmen, men and women who are focusing on their occupation, their lives, their family, their individual concerns. They go serve 2 years, and then they come on home and they focus again on their community, their church life, their family, and their community.
Dennis Linthicum on the program. Let's take a few more calls before we take off here. Stuart, go ahead. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning. Dennis, I want to say, first of all, I want to thank you for coming out last night. And I know the people really appreciated you, and they appreciated your common sense. And that's the kind of people we want in office, people who have successful lives, because that shows us that they have common sense working for them already. They don't need to be a politician to improve their life. They already have a good life. And you know what, Dennis, we're running with you.
All right, Stuart, thanks for the call. Let's go to Ed. Ed on questions. Go right ahead.
Good morning, and I hope my voice isn't too gravelly this morning. But...
Oh, we like gravelly voices. It sounds manly, Ed. Go ahead.
Well, I was receiving a phone call about a week ago that seemed very slanted. It was a political call, a poll, and it was asking questions that, would you vote for Greg Walden over, Dennis? And some of the questions were, if you knew that Dennis Linthicum had a court case going on and such about certain things, would you still vote for him? Would you be more liable to vote for him, strongly for him or not strongly for him?
What kind of court case was it? Did the robocall say anything? Or
no, it was a person.
Oh, it's a person calling. Okay.
Yeah, and he definitely was asking leading questions about Dennis, but to cast doubt into your mind.
So kind of a push poll. Are you familiar with that, Dennis?
I'm not familiar with it. I can only imagine where it's coming from.
I thought about it later.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I haven't received that call. I wish they'd call me and I'd tell them what I would do if that were to occur.
Yeah, what kind of court are you involved in? Any court case right now?
Of course not. That's
okay.
what makes it all the more ludicrous. Is I am living my life in Beatty, Oregon, about 40 miles east of Klamath. And Diane and I have lived off the grid. We homeschooled our children. I have a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's from Biola University. And I am currently a county commissioner, but I've been in private industry for Diane and I have been married 33 years. So I've been in private industry for 30 years, if you will, in public office for 3 years. My mind is not tuned to how you would slant a poll to make people hesitate when putting a checkbox against my name.
How interesting. Lauren, you have a question for Dennis Linthicum. Go ahead.
Yes, Dennis. Did I just hear you say that if you got elected, you'd only serve for 2 years?
Certainly that would be the specific question was, do you think 8 years is enough? And I answered yes, and yes. I said 8 years as a congressman would be appropriate. I was putting words and thoughts into the minds of our founders. I said they recognize that as congressmen and women in the House, they bear a great burden of responsibility with regard to finances, and they thought it was appropriate that Congress people get elected every 2 years. I concur with that, just to make sure you're in touch with your constituency, certainly no more than 4 terms.
But no more than 4 terms?
4 terms, that'd be 8 years.
Be 8 years. Well,
Okay.
I just trying to figure out how much influence someone, a short-termer, would have in the Congress, and because people are there, you build up seniority, and seniority is significant in my opinion. And I'm just concerned about that and concerned about where you're getting finances.
Right. If you need to help with finances, you can come to Dennis2014.com and pitch in with all the other good folks who are helping out in that area. But let me address the real point that you're pointing at is I can guarantee Obamacare was not written by a freshman or a sophomore. I can guarantee that the $1.1 trillion budget that just got kicked through without being online for 3 days like the Republicans promised, without being brought in a regular scheduled basis, one agency at a time like Republicans promised in their pledge in 2010 that Greg Walden was a signer of, I can guarantee that those omnibus kinds of packages are not put together by men who are rookies or freshmen, and this is part of the problem. The spending culture in Washington, D.C. is our real enemy.
So you're saying, in effect, though, that the real danger to people comes from what is actually put into the mix, not from the freshmen, but by the so-called leaders or the senior members or the leadership then.
That's right. And you heard this caller say he thought seniority was important. Unfortunately...
Well, it is important when it comes to directing where it goes, though.
It becomes very important when you're directing it to your capital crony, special interest, and lobbyist friends, because now you have the weight and the power and the pull to push it into the corner you want to push it in. I'm suggesting the federal government should not be spending our economic resources in that fashion. The unintended consequences of government spending and government policy making create all of these other environments that businessmen and women can't read as easily as price, supply, and demand. The market produces fantastic information for decision making. Congress does not produce good information for decision making.
All right, Dennis, final question I would have for you. The public lands timber issue has been intractable. This has been something that everybody, especially in the Republican world, including Greg, has been trying to get some movement on for a number of years. How would you find it differently, if at all?
Yeah, I think Greg's ONC timber bill is a mistaken idea, because what Greg is doing is he's taking 50% of that landscape and giving it away. Here in Jackson County, you own 16.8% of the ONC timber, and your commissioners will soon be agreeing to this legislation if it goes through Wyden and Walden's office, and it will come out so that you, instead of getting 16.8, only get 8.4, and they're going to call that a win. I think that's not in the best interest of this community. Here's how I would attack it. I would force the federal government to properly dispose of all of those federal lands and give those lands to the states wherein they lie, so that all the land in Oregon belongs to Oregonians. Oregon as a state now has jurisdictional responsibility. They can delve it up into the 36 counties if they choose, and they can partition it. They can release it to private industry. They can now utilize that tax base for productive means instead of letting the federal government allow it to burn year after year after year.
Okay, how would you do that? Because, I mean, that sounds good. I think that is a constitutional way of dealing with it, but if it was constitutional, it could have been done by this time. Why hasn't it been?
Yeah, well, in 1976, the Federal Land Management Policy Act, FLTMA as it's known, has wording in it that says the federal government will retain those lands. So it's in our lifetime that the focus has gone from disposing or ceding those lands to the states into retention of that land. And I think it's time we turn the ship around and said, no, the federal government has no constitutional authority for managing those lands. Those lands belong to the jurisdictional responsibility of the states wherein they lie.
All right, Dennis Linthicum, Dennis2014.com is the website for more. Are you going to be speaking anytime soon here in Southern Oregon again, or are you just heading out of town at the moment? What are your plans at the moment?
Right. We are putting our calendar together. If you would like me to do a meet and greet in your neighborhood, we would love to schedule it out. We're going to be touching all the communities like I just described. We went up through Bend and Prineville and all the way out to Joseph and LeGrand and then back over to Hood River. We're going to try and do that once a month and meet and greet people on a daily basis or weekly basis or a monthly basis. As often as we can hit the road, we're going to do it. So this week I don't have anything else scheduled, and we're going to head back to camp kind of build up our resources and then go at it again. We'll have signs soon, and people can sign up on the website to put yard signs out, etc.
All right, very good. Dennis, great to see you this morning. Thanks for coming in and talking to the folks, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
It's always a pleasure.
737 at AM 1440 KMED, and once again, Dennis2014.com. This is the Bill Meyer Show.